As we enter the final years of SpongeBob's web game reign on Nick.com, it's good to know that we were still receiving some decent work from the companies that stuck around. The release of Live from Bikini Bottom in 2015 showed that the games were still going strong, so we had a lot to anticipate going into 2016. So let's jump right into this year and see what Nickelodeon had for us. First off, we had the Game of Luck, which was just that, a game of luck. You're given treasure chests and you try to pick the right one. You might find gold doubloons, or you'll be stung by a jellyfish. Kinda like opening a box that's been in your closet for 12 years and a spider jumps out at you. But other than that, it's just luck. Pretty fun though. Let's check out a bigger one. This is Hero's Choice. This was an interesting inclusion to the SpongeBob library because it wasn't like anything else you'd find in it. It's a small choose-your-own-adventure game with many different endings. SpongeBob and Patrick assume the roles of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, then you have to guide them through an adventure to save the town, unless you mess up. Then things get a little different. Starting off, this infamous narrator introduces us to the plot.
The sun has once again set on Bikini Bottom, and on this eve, SpongeBob and Patrick are retiring to bed. It's about that time. Time for a bedtime story. But who is the subject of this tale? The famous Mermaid Man or the brave Barnacle Boy?
So then we get to choose either SpongeBob or Patrick. Starting with SpongeBob, your first task is to dramatically perform a donut fist bump, which will send you on one path or another. If you get it right, SpongeBob and Patrick head into town to save it from chaos. They find Man Ray and Doodlebob attacking the city, so you can choose which one to stop. Hey, didn't we already stop Doodles from attacking the city just a few videos ago? This is just a regular thing, don't worry about it too much. But if you stop the Doodles, you get a fun minigame where you have to erase them. Then the city is saved and the heroes eat doodled ice cream. And that's the end of the game. Okay, review's over. See you in the next memory. As you can see, there are a total of 14 different endings we can get. That's quite a lot, so I guess we still have some work to get done. But first we have to sit through the unskippable intro again. Hope that doesn't get annoying. So let's see what happens if we don't hit the donuts together this time.
Oops!
So after failing to start a superhero roleplay, SpongeBob goes to work instead. Don't worry, I've had many relatable situations. But it seems his shenanigans have taken too long and the customers are going wild. Hey, they're replicating that scene from Little Yellow Book. You can either feed them or ignore them entirely to deal with robo-crabs, who may or may not be plankton in disguise. One thing I find funny about this format is the insinuation that if you do one thing, nothing stops the other thing from happening. So if I choose to feed the customers, plankton will still steal the formula. But that seems like a non-issue, so let's feed the customers. As you can see, the mini-games are all very basic. Like in the legendary Flip or Flop, we have to stop Patrick from stealing our patties while we try to cook them. We swat his hand away before he can snatch them. It's really simple, and it's forgiving if you miss a couple. Then the crowd is satisfied, but the Krusty Krab is a mess. Then we get to watch the intro sequence again. Here's where the game starts to get a little annoying. If you want to see the other options, you'll have to play up until that point again, just sitting through the cutscenes as you wait. Unfortunately, that also requires you to either hit the donut or miss it. While it isn't rocket science, you might end up clicking at the wrong time and sending yourself on the wrong path. If you've seen all the endings where you hit the donut and you're trying to get the ones where you don't, you might have to sit through a path you've already been on before you can try again. Not my favorite aspect of this game. But if we let Patrick steal our burgers, he makes messy meals out of them and feeds the customers anyway. So the two endings really aren't that different. But what if we go after robo-crabs instead? After we sit through all this again, of course. We don't actually get a game or anything. SpongeBob just trips and hits the eject button. This exposes plankton, and yeah, that's it. So that wraps up the Krusty Krab. Let's go back to saving the town and see what happens if we don't erase the doodles.
Run for your sea lives! Even the delicious bits have been doodled! Grab yourself a hanky, folks! That'll be hard to eat!
Oh well, not the worst fate for humanity. But let's sit through all this again so we can fight Man Ray instead. God forbid we accidentally miss the donut. But it's really easy. You just click to deflect his grease shots with a spatula.
Who thinks he'll taste like chicken?
Narrator? That's very obviously a French fry.
Look at all those chickens!
And that's it. Was that ending everything we were hoping for? French fried Man Ray. Okay, now let's see what happens if we lose. Oh, everyone's a French fry now. Totally worth sitting through all those cutscenes again. And that does it for SpongeBob, but we still have to see how Patrick's story goes. You still have to hit the donut though.
You've done this before!
Hey, how'd you know? And this takes place during the same story, so you have to save the citizens while SpongeBob deals with the enemies. You can either save the children or the snails, and you know what? I'm an animal lover, so we're helping the snails. They're in a tree, but a laser is coming right for them. As a result, you have to click on the snails to help them. You just click on them all, including the ones that go behind branches. Then you win, and that's that. But do we really want to see what happens if we lose? I mean, snails are the SpongeBob equivalent of cats, and SpongeBob games have shown they aren't beyond absolutely mutilating those, so we might as well. But the laser just hits the tree trunk and sends them flying into space. Some fall off too. Just cartoony enough to not be super morbid. Anyway, let's see what happens if we save the kids. Debris is falling on them, so we have to click on the junk to destroy it. I don't see why these kids don't just leave rather than run around in the line of fire, but okay, I guess. If we win, Patrick eats some of the stuff he finds in the junk. But if we lose, we get to see the children perish. And on top of it, you die with them.
You too, Barnacle Boy! Strike!
You know, I always said bowling would be the death of me. This is why I play games online and not in real life. But now let's miss the donut.
It's time to get out there and not mess anything up! Oops!
So having failed, Patrick goes for a walk, but he sees an ice cream blowing in the wind. It lands in front of him, so he can probably easily snatch it up, but if you choose to chase it, it blows all the way to rock bottom. You give up on the ice cream and decide to take a bus back home. You then get a game where you have to click the button on your moving glove light to see the schedule, and if you win, you just catch the bus and that's that. But if you lose, you have to deal with the strange residents at the bus stop. Absolutely a worst case scenario. But you know what the best ending is? The one where you just go home. You get ice cream there and get a brain freeze. And that's every possible conclusion in SpongeBob Hero's Choice. While the game is a neat concept, there really should have been a way to skip directly to the choices so you wouldn't have to sit through the cutscenes all over again. It can be draining to sit through just for brief endings that only last a few seconds. I appreciate the idea behind this one, and there are some funny moments in it, but it could have used a little polishing around the edges. But moving on, I'd like to remind you all of a little event that went down back in 2014. Remember the 2 SpongeBob games that were made in collaboration with Sonic? The restaurant, that is. Well, the Sonic collabs weren't quite over yet, because we received another one this year. This was Big Bubble Blowout. Now, the game itself was very simplistic. You're running from a bunch of killer bubbles in a gigantic maze, so you have to move SpongeBob with the arrow so he makes all the right turns, avoiding walls and obstacles. It's amusing, but you don't usually get to play for very long. It's really easy to die, and you have to start over when you do. So naturally, there are codes you can enter to prolong your gameplay. When you get one right, this happens. You could get these codes in Sonic Wacky Packs, but even with these, you still don't last especially long. The power-ups run out of energy quickly and disappear entirely when you run into a new one. Not to mention, the game is kind of vague with its power-up descriptions, so you might not know how to use one in the spur of the moment. It's okay for what it is though. Not world-changing, but you can have some fun with it. Now let's check out Bikini Bottom Beat. Listen to the music in this one. That really gets you in the mood. In this, you go through a series of stages and click to replicate the beat the other characters say. Unfortunately, Age hasn't been very good to this one, so it isn't very responsive. I consistently get patterns wrong despite doing them correctly. Still, all the stages are playable, so that's good enough. The more simple ones include one in the Krusty Krab with Squidward and a customer, and one in front of a wintry chum bucket. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy are carolers while Plankton is commanding them with a megaphone. I love the detail of the candy cane hooks. It probably works for attracting fish too. The one in front of Sandy's house is also interesting. What's Patrick looking so lovey-dovey for? Since when does he have a crush on Sandy? Maybe it's for SpongeBob. But Sandy jams out and you have to replicate it. But make sure you wait for her to say yee-haw first. For Larry's stage, you're playing volleyball and you have to click when it comes toward you. Though you do have to keep it in the air once it does, so that might take you by surprise. It's a creative take on the format. And for the last stage, you're catching jellyfish in jellyfish fields. You have to catch them when they're in the air right in front of you. And as for the big ones, you have to wait for them to backtrack and come forward again before you swing. It's also creative. On top of all this, every stage has 4 sections, most of which will give you trophies for getting a decent score. Not bad. Good for a quick little playthrough, but the company that made this is one you might not recognize from this series alone. Art of Play Games is a very popular company from Australia. If you've been with this channel for a bit, you might remember when we looked at the Doom game, an Invader Zim game they made, and a very good one at that. From 2016 onward, they would become almost as prevalent as Workin' Man on Nick.com. Another game they made this year was Blockbuster. While it is a crossover between SpongeBob and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you can choose to play either just a SpongeBob stage or a TMNT one. It's an extremely fast version of Tetris with some amusing block graphics. It's okay, but the blocks move so fast I barely have time to think. Never put me in charge of stacking sandwiches shaped like cubes. Guess I'll never get a job at White Castle. So let's move on to a really interesting one. This is Bikini Bottom Button Bash. Honestly, that title could work for nearly every fighting game on Nick.com, but it's actually a lot more complicated than just mashing buttons. As we can see in the opening dialogue, this was inspired by the episode Little Yellow Book. They really liked that episode this year. But Squidward was sick of SpongeBob's diary nonsense, so he hid his diary in the world's scariest locale. Interesting way of wording it. So now we have to get it back. Every stage, you click the mouse to navigate SpongeBob through whatever obstacles you get faced with. At the start, you throw spatulas at jellyfish. All your clicks are counted, so if you want a good score, you have to navigate carefully. In the second stage, you're being chased by the dirty bubble as you run across collapsible platforms. Just button mash to reach the end here. But then you have to click and hold the mouse at just the right moment to jump to different ledges. These can be the most difficult stages to figure out, especially when you're on a breakable platform. I like that sound effect because it sounds like the one from Otto's Magic Blocks. Then for the next stage, you have to click to turn vents on or off. They'll launch you if they're on when you step over them, so turn them off if there's an obstacle above them. Oh hey King Jellyfish, what are you doing here? Then after this, every stage utilizes one of these mechanics. As you can see, this one's a little frustrating, but satisfying to get right. The ones where you run from the dirty bubble are also made harder by the addition of tentacles that emerge from the ground. That means you have to stop before you run into them, and watch out for sea bears and falling anchors. Hey, SpongeBob didn't need to draw a circle, he just needed to throw a spatula at the sea bear. Try that with a bear in real life and let me know how that goes for you. The stages get harder as you go along, but they can be entertaining to figure out. You have to have quick fingers to get through them. Still, little can prepare you for the very last stage. It's ridiculously hard. Look, you're seriously telling me I'm too close here? Sometimes it feels like SpongeBob only chooses to stop running when it inconveniences you. But once you endure to the end, you get to see the brilliant line, "This is Squidward's scary place? More like scary delicious." Yeah, I don't even know what to make of that. This game is okay. It's fun to figure out, but I can see some people getting frustrated with it. You really have to work your fingers in this one. But if you want another game that involves button mashing, we also have the Great Snail Race. It has a surprising amount of detail in it. First, you choose a coach between SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, or Sandy. This will determine which voice you hear the entire game, as well as which stats your snail has from the start. And what's going on with Sandy's face? Then you go to a place called the Snail Garage where you choose from a bunch of different colors and accessories to design your racer. You can unlock a few that give you more speed or energy, or make you obstacle proof. You can also choose your snail's name, but none of the options are especially humorous. Then once you're in, you choose a cup and race in 3 different rounds to unlock the next one. The first is Oyster Stadium. You race the other snails by mashing the left and right arrow keys, but once your energy runs low, your snail assumes the exhausted Gary pose from the episode. Very nice detail there. You also have to jump over obstacles, which is hardly fair because you're the only one that has any on your track. Maybe we're just so good we can handle the added challenge. I mean, we do have our own speed boost that can blast us a good length without hurting our energy. Just remember to jump while you're using this. It's easy to forget. And if you win first, you get to choose a gift and gain a new accessory. The ones that increase your speed will be extremely useful in the later stages. But the game is extremely forgiving because you don't even need to get first to unlock the other cups. The second one is the Krusty Krab, while the third is the Olympus Coliseum. I like this game and I appreciate the different customization options, but it's kind of unfortunate that you absolutely have to use certain ones if you want to win more races, even if they don't really suit the look you're going for. Still, pretty good. But while we're on the topic of snail games, let's look at one more big one before we touch on a couple unique ones. This is Snail Park, based on the location from the episode Gary in Love. In this, we run a park and want to attract as many snails as we can. We do this by luring them with a food dish and catering to their desires. Most snails have funny names that correlate with their designs, such as escargot here. But the snails actually pay you for your service. They might want to be brushed, watered, play with yarn, or have their picture taken. Then you can add their name and photo to your scrapbook. By buying more expensive food, snails that pay more will show up. Then you can afford items to decorate your park with. It isn't really hard once you get the hang of it and know how to spend your money. It's very relaxing, as a matter of fact. You can get wrapped up in this pretty easily. Not to mention some of the snails have some really funny designs, such as Jerry here. And you get so used to seeing these bizarre ones that it's actually kinda shocking when Gary shows up. The one we're most used to seeing is the most surprising to see. But to close out, we have two other games left to check out. Not necessarily complicated ones either. One made by Workin' Man was called SpongeBob's Fortune Teller. It's a silly concept where you have a sentence with blank spaces in the middle of it. You're given 4 options and you select one to fill a space. Then you get a completed sentence based on whichever answers you chose, such as, you will karate chop until Squidward cleans Patrick's house. You will kiss Pearl until Mrs. Puff pets Squidward. Wait, huh? Make sense of that. Some of these can be weird, but most combinations are pretty simple. It's a cute little activity. But now to close out, here's a really cool one. You remember playing all those scene creator games when you were a kid? I used to love those. I'd always send the Mario and Sonic characters on super intense missions and make little adventures of my own. Well, thanks to Nickelodeon's Make a Scene series, you could do this with your favorite Nick shows. So let's check out the one for SpongeBob. You choose a location, then pick which characters and items you want to put in the scene. You can also add speech bubbles and specific items that will encourage a character to emote. It's a little limited for a scene creator, but it's fun to see what you can do with it. Now look at this image. This sure is a sight to see. Mr. Krabs eating a patty while Squidward says yeehaw at the sight of his magazine. Plankton loudly declares meow while Sandy steals a bag of money and Patrick eats bubbles. Now look at this. Party at SpongeBob's house. I really should make a video where I just mess around in things like this.
Haha, I've stolen the formula, oh no!
Oh, look at Sandy kicking Squidward like that. Now he's angrily walking away. So yeah, these are always a lot of fun. Would play again. But for now, that's gonna bring us to the end of the 2016 SpongeBob Web Games. We had a lot of fun here. We were superheroes, we stacked sandwiches, we raced snails, and even found a diary in a place that was scary delicious. What a year this has been. 2017 would go on to be the last big year for SpongeBob Web Games, then they'd become a lot less frequent. We still have a few videos left to go, but we are nearing the end here. If you've stuck around thus far, I've enjoyed having you along, and I hope you'll stick around as we get through the remainder of these. For now, be sure to subscribe, follow me on the accounts in the description below, and tune in to our next installment. Thank you for joining me. I will see you in the next memory.